let's go ahead and get started. Our visiting speaker for the business portion of Grand Rounds canceled about 2 weeks ago, so I'm filling in. First, I'd like to say congratulations to the faculty and to the residents for a great job at the South Texas chapter of the ACS. It was a great showing. We came in second in Resident Jeopardy, but it was a lot of fun and a good time. And welcome to Dr. Kranjawala, our visitor for general surgery. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So the 7 P's to be. I'm going to basically speak from my experience and my expectations. Then I'm going to talk about these 7 P's. We'll talk about them in detail, but then I'm going to try to work into what's important for you, particularly young people, residents and students, for your teams and for your institutions. These are 2 common questions that I get when we interview residents. It is very often that I get asked, what do you look for in a resident applicant, or what makes for a good resident in this program? And it's also very common that I get asked from new faculty members, what are your expectations for a new faculty member in the department? So I'm going to try to answer those questions just from my own experience. I'm going to speak from my experience as a student, undergraduate student, medical student, resident, faculty member, a participant in a really diverse regional trauma system, then as division chief and department chair and ACS Committee on Trauma chair. Doesn't seem like that long ago, but it's been a long time since all that started. This is from this week's ACS Surgery News. There's 2 editorials, invited editorials. One's from me and one's from J.D. Richardson. Dr. Richardson, as I think pretty much everyone knows, Dr. Richardson was a graduate of this program and was also really critically ill over the past year. He's doing a lot better. He's the current president of the American College of Surgeons. I visited him when I was in Louisville, when he was actually in rehab at the time, and he's been a mentor and friend of mine for a very long time, and has given me a lot of very good advice. I'm very appreciative. One of the things that in that conversation, he was trying to express. Well, I'm not certain what he was trying to express, but it was clear that he was kind of surprised at my success. I mean that in the best possible way. Like a mentor would tell you that, you know. It's, and I do think to some degree my course has been unusual and perhaps unexpected considering where I came from. So I'm gonna. This is a key part of my development, was working in a regional trauma system, and I just want to characterize that for you. That in that environment, so you're basically and we started with really nothing. We started with just a meeting, and in that situation, you've got hospitals from a 26,000 square mile area, from University Hospital, BAMC and Wilford Hall, to tiny level 4 hospitals, and something like 100 EMS agencies. And really, other than yourself, you really control nothing. It's not like you're in a room where you're anyone's boss. You really control nothing. And in that room, it's a multidisciplinary set of people from from basically people who just got into medicine through paramedicine to very experienced surgeons. There's competitors in the room right across from each other. There's a lot of politics, and there's challenges in our region with geography. It's 26,000 square miles is a lot of territory to cover. And even though you control nothing, I learned you can actually influence almost everything. And that influence is more important than power or direct reporting. You can really make a difference in that environment. And I think I'm very honored. It was a great learning experience for me. Also, similar to that, you may think, well, the chair of surgery has a lot of direct reports, but I think the chair of surgery it's apparently similar to managing a touring cricket team. This is from West Hall, 1995. Who said it's like being in charge of a cemetery. There's lots of people underneath you, but nobody really seems to be listening. So I can relate. And I would be remiss if I didn't, speaking to young people, if I didn't give this advice that my mom was a secretary in Midland for Texaco, and her boss was an attorney, and for reasons that he somewhere in the middle of my college career, he took an interest in me, and this was his advice to me, that he said, don't worry if you don't get into medical school, it'll all be fine, and it doesn't matter what you do. You can be a mechanic, you can be a teacher, you can be a lawyer. He said even lawyers help people. He was a lawyer. And he said, but if you set a goal to help as many people as you can, you will be happy and you will be successful, and it'll all be fine. And I happened to be listening at the time. It's hard to get a 20-year-old sometime to listen, but I was listening at the time, and I still remember the conversation as if it were a month ago. So the problem for you, the problem for an intern, the problem for a medical student, I tried to make this list of things that lead to that what I would think would be the things required for minimal surgical competence. And truthfully, if you have a big gap in any one of those areas, it's a big problem. So none of our fourth-year medical students, not the best, not the most talented fourth-year medical students we get, none of them come with all of these skills. These skills just don't come out of medical school. And the problem, practically, it's not often stated. It often gets couched in terms of duty hours and a bunch of other things. But the truth is that the fund of knowledge that's required is significantly different and significantly broader than 35 years ago. And so is the technical skill set. It's not just open and vascular surgery. No, it's open, laparoscopic, robotic, endovascular. And really, you have to get to some minimal level of competence for almost every one of these things. So it's a real challenge. So trying to think of what advice to give for a young person that's not overwhelming. I mean, I guess we could drop some books that make a big heavy thud on the table, and you'd get people's attention. And before I get into the meat of what I need to say, I think it's very important for you to know that regardless of whether you chose to be a leader, and some of you I know don't really want to be in any leadership role, you want to practice surgery, that's what you want to do, and but for better or for worse, and I think for the better, but for better or for worse, you must be a leader, and you're going to have to lead a team. You're going to have to lead a team of people, and you're probably going to have to lead multiple teams of people. And some of you may take a course that you may be different. Maybe you wind up in politics as a leader, or maybe you wind up on a school board. But you're going to be a community leader, a leader of your teams, whether you like it or not. And you're a leader now with respect to your team. You're a leader now with respect to your team. And I think it's very important. One of the first things with respect to leadership is you really need to be conscious, and you need to make conscious decisions. Because I'll tell you this, as a previous third-year medical student, you may not think of me as a third-year medical student, but as a third-year medical student, those third-year medical students remember almost everything you say. They certainly remember the tone, and they may be babbling it when they're in a nursing home when they're 90 years old. So you need to be conscious with respect to the decisions, because this is just true. If you're not conscious about the decisions you make to do conscious good, it's far more likely for me to do unconscious harm than unconscious good. Far more likely. Sherman Goodwin, circa 1854, Victoria, Texas. There's about 800 people in Victoria at the time, summed it up well in his quote below. So 7 P's to be: participatory, professional, be a problem solver, be a process improvement leader, be passionate, be patient. That's not a patient, even though you may be a patient sometime, but be patient and be perseverant. Participatory. I could have made this a P, people, or maybe Pistana for one of the P's. We'll start with Dr. Pistana as the P. Be friendly and collaborative. The people on your teams that you're leading, really, I know you may think they need friends. They don't really need that many more friends, but they do need for you to be friendly. They need for you to be friendly and interested and engaged. So what about participation? The first P. I put it first, even though I consider it of secondary importance to professionalism, but I put it first because you can't get to professionalism if you're not there. If you're not there present, you don't get to professionalism. So this is participation in voting, working on a community project by year of birth. And this is just prior to 1900, and this is 1970. So I'm born right about here. And you can see since the time I was born, it's a steady downhill spiral with respect to participation. I think this is better. It's my gut feeling. It's better definitely from a social media standpoint. But the sort of engagement that it takes to actually be present with a group of people and working together is subtly different than social media. But I show this just to make the point that the bar, if you look at around my age, from here to here, the bar for participation has been falling, which is actually a plus for you. If you participate, it's a plus. If we were in 1949, there'd be a high bar for participation. So, importance. This is my grandmother. Your grandmother was correct that showing up is important. It's probably not 90%, but it's a big chunk. That actually showing up, being engaged, and being friendly is important. My grandmother told me whenever I was a little person, I didn't really believe her, but she said, if you want to have friends, make yourself friendly. That's what she said. She said that 1,000 times. If you want to have friends, make yourself friendly. And I would say I'm not really a social butterfly, so that was uncomfortable for me. I would much rather be in the corner somewhere. I certainly, on the dance floor, would rather be in the corner. And I would say it's uncomfortable in the beginning, and I know it's uncomfortable for young people. A colleague was trying to get people interested trying to get them interested in belonging to the Texas Surgical Society and speaking to young people. And he was telling them, you need to belong. I'm recommending you. It's a very good organization. It's going on its 100th year. And they said, well, yeah, that's easy for you to say. You know everyone. Well, yeah, he only knows everyone because he's been coming to the meeting for 20 years. In the beginning, he knew no one. So it's uncomfortable, but you really need to consciously participate. You also get into some real learning. I'll talk about it from a real learning from a leadership team-making standpoint. It's easier to lead a team if there's structure around it. It's easier to do that if there's structure. So a chief resident running a team, there's at least some structure. Certainly the division chiefs and department chairs and the dean have a lot of structure that help with that. But actually meeting colleagues, working together, doing projects that don't have any real structure in the beginning develops real capacity and real accountability. Real accountability for you to, I'm challenged if I go to a meeting, whatever I say, it's not automatically true. In fact, in some meetings, it's automatically not true until I can prove that it is correct. And so, but if you do that, if you participate, you develop friends, you develop collaborators, and lifelong partners. It's very important. So, friends, mentors, national partners. So how to participate? How to do it? People ask me this, and whenever I interview folks, they say, well, how do you recommend participating? Well, it starts with your division or your private practice group. It starts with your team of people. Participate in that group. Do things, work with them, volunteer for things. Be active in your group of people, your team. Then in your institution, in our institution, work on committees, work on work groups, do things, be engaged. You start to really learn how an organization works. So it starts with your initial group and then your institution. Then participate in regional surgical organizations. I've listed some of them here. There's a bunch more. But participate in the South Texas chapter of the American College of Surgeons. As I said, starting off the talk, we had a great showing. I was super proud, enthusiastic. I think this is actually the best attended meeting the South Texas chapters had in a very long time. And our residents were super engaged, as were our faculty. It was very good. And you can see that now then you get to be friends with some people who basically are who you realize they're actually just like you. They're not any different than you. And then participate in national surgical organizations and specialty societies. It really makes a difference in your career, but more important than your career, it makes an important mark in your life. Why? I'll let you read this quote. Why is it important to more than just you? We think of institutions as cold, autonomous, bureaucratic entities, which they are. But really, the quality of our institutions depends on the quality of our participation. That's what it really depends upon. If we're frustrated with the political process, we really have to look around and look at ourselves. I don't like saying it, but we do. So I said you develop leadership skills in these, non-structured participation. Well, some people poo-poo consensus decision-making. I was actually in Washington, D.C. On an educational advocacy trip, and I happened to be on an elevator with some people in some really nice suits in the Capitol in Washington, D.C. We were on an elevator in the Rayburn building. It's an elevator ride that's only, it's what, a minute, 30 seconds, something like that. Enough time for them. These people look like, serious Washington types. And they basically were talking about the elevator as the dysfunction of Washington. If something went wrong with the elevator, it was just a minor little thing. And then one of them said, yeah, we didn't come to consensus. And they were really being deriding about consensus decision making and talking about how that's really the problem. Well, in reality, the problem is we've lost the art of consensus decision making. That's really our problem. And it really is a higher level of decision making. And for those of you who think it's too time consuming, it's too messy, takes too much time, in reality, if you can engage the group, and I'll just put it in terms in the regional trauma system, this is no longer the case now, but there were times as a young person where at least I thought I might have been the smartest person in the room I was in. And I learned, not super quickly, but pretty quickly that I was never smarter than the room. If I could engage the people in the room, and we could engage each other to use all of our creative powers, I was really never smarter than the room. In fact, I was pitiful with respect to the room fully engaged. And but this takes time, and it takes dialogue. It actually takes talking, and it takes more than talking. It takes listening. And it takes respect and kindness. Key skills for you. Vital skills for you. If your goal is to influence, or even if it's not your goal, you're going to have to influence things. And really, put it in a, surgeons sometimes like adversarial things more than this consensus touchy-feely thing. Quite frankly, if you're not at the table, you're being served on the table. That's how it is. That's how it is. If we're not successful in engaging hospitals, politicians, colleagues, it's bad. Professional. Our profession. Benjamin Franklin was about 30, probably 30-ish, when he said this quote: "Sell not virtue to purchase wealth, nor liberty to purchase power." Don't trade your virtue to get rich, and don't sell your liberty for power. Can you imagine a 30-year-old coming up with not this, but a whole bunch of other pithy little sayings that you give a one sentence, you realize that's one sentence is, like a whole book in reality. So, professionalism. What is the role of the professionals? This is us, surgeons, physicians, nurses, administrators, students. It's pretty well defined. And this was Rakesh Khurana. Whenever I started reading him, I think he was an assistant professor at Harvard. Now he's the dean of Harvard College. And that he sums it up really well. And why he studied this so much, just so you know, is that Dr. Khurana's whole focus of his body of work was to try to apply professionalism, the tenets of professionalism, to management, to the C-suite. And he admits that it's actually an uphill battle. But it caused him to think a lot about what is professionalism and what is the professional. And this is what he says. I think it's a very good, if you think about surgery, meets all those criteria as a profession. But the roots of professionalism come from Latin, which really in the beginning, this is Italian, but in the beginning, one of the professions started with a profession of faith, a profession to some key tenet. Our ancestors, about 2,500 years ago, had to confess or to profess to something. It came to be known as the Hippocratic Oath. But what they really had to profess to was that the patient's interests come before my own. That is the unifying profession of our profession. It's critical. This is a really good paper. I still like it a lot. Dr. Moulton, who's a neurosurgeon, his hypothesis is that he asked the question, why do patients trust us? Why is someone willing to come see him and after a 15-minute conversation have an incision that goes from here to here and pretty much is as close to you can get as cutting someone in half, and they sign up for that after about a 15-minute conversation? Well, he concludes that it's two reasons. The first is our profession, what we profess. The patient's interests come first. And the second is we base that knowledge and action off of the science as best we can determine it. David Hillis, the previous chair of medicine here, I once did a very informal survey at the white coat ceremony, and for those of you who go to the I recommend if you don't go to the white coat ceremony, you should go. It's a very good ceremony. It's when the medical students come. It's very positive. And, so I was talking to the faculty up there. You're sitting up there like this. You just sit up there. I just sort of did my own little personal survey of what is professionalism? Well, what does it mean? We think it's very important. What does it mean? It's one of the core competencies. And, this is what David said. And, he basically emphasizes it is kindness and courtesy, but it's also competence. And Dr. Khurana, I think extremely concisely hits the nail on the head. What he here was trying to do is in his own mind, differentiate what's the difference between a professional model and a corporate model. What's the difference between a professional model and a more typical business model? I will create value for society rather than extract it. So if we find ourselves extracting value rather than adding value to our communities, we're doing something wrong. Ambrose Pare. I love this quote. I think I've used it in about 20 of my talks. So this is the story of Ambrose Pare when he was 12 years old. He came from a modest background. He was not rich, and he was a barber, following a barber surgeon, and he witnessed an operation, probably a draining of an abscess or something like that. And he says, "It appeared to me to be beautiful and best of all things to work thus for the relief and cure of suffering." And then the next key point about his professionalism, from that moment forward, from that instant at the age of 12, I promised myself that this should be the task of my life. And he literally changed the world. Became the surgeon to kings, and revolutionized surgery in France. And obviously, he did something. We're still talking about him 500 years later. Problem solver. Be a problem solver. Promote a culture of yes. Medicine, my opinion, has a culture of no. A culture of no. It's very common. People start with no. No, I won't see the patient. No. Yes, I'll see the patient. No. That culture has a high cost. It has a high cost. I personally think people spend so much time saying no, it's so inefficient they could say yes and be done in a third of the time. So we should promote and model a culture of yes. Yes, I can help you. If someone calls me and there's someone sick, yes, I can. Yes, I will figure out a way. Yes, I can do it. Sí se puede. Yes, I can. Yes, I will. Now, quite frankly, and I'll just tell you, you probably all know, if you start with me with no, you're going to get to yes. I'm going to get you to yes. It just is a question of how much effort is going to be applied. That's what's going to happen. And that's actually what should happen. If I'm telling you no, 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 you just need to apply as much force as you need to budge me from the hole. So inefficient. And it leads to a negativity. Ironically, the people who start with no are unhappy and don't get happier by saying no. I think there's 3 levels of problem solver: a problem creator, a problem studier, and a problem solver. I probably should have inserted problem identifier in there because I might identify a problem and choose not to study it. But 3 levels. This is what Robert Greenleaf, in his book Servant Leadership, talking about us. He's not talking about us specifically. He's talking about society. He basically makes the point that we live in an imperfect world. It has all sorts of flaws: bureaucracy, lazy people, not prepared people, all sorts of problems. But until that we have a tendency to be critics and experts and actually don't see the problem. I don't see the problem as my problem, as me as the problem. Therefore, the problem never gets fixed because I'm part of the problem. So try to solve problems. Seriously, try to solve problems. When the nurse calls you for something, usually they have a problem, they need it solved. Once you realize that it's just a simple problem solving, yes, I can solve this problem. Yes, I'm happy to do it. But try to solve the problem. Don't just identify and study problems. And for heaven's sake, do not create them. Don't create them. And sometimes when people dig in on the no, they really create problems. A big problem. Be a process improvement leader. This is very important. In fact, it's probably second to professionalism. So I'm going to talk from a personal standpoint: personal performance improvement and organizational performance improvement. This is the problem I pose to you. This is the problem I pose to you. This is a daunting list. But I think when someone asks me, what trait or what characteristic are you looking for in a resident? It's hard to say that. Of course, I tell them we're looking for everything everyone else is looking for: honest, straight, honest, hardworking, smart. But in reality, there is a trait that if the person adopts this approach, a comprehensive, constructive, self-critical approach to patient care and performance improvement, miracles happen. People turn in 5 years what is a real weakness into a real true strength. And I want you to really listen, because every one of those words is important. Comprehensive, comprehensive. Anytime I do anything, I try to look for what I could do to do it a little bit better. Constructive, not destructive on yourself. I don't want your guilt. I mean, I know I'm good at creating guilt. My kids tell me this all the time. But what you need to be is constructive, not destructively self-critical, but constructively critical. How do you know if you're being constructive? If when you do it over again, your performance is a little better, and certainly you're not doing it worse. Look at someone who misses a free throw and then watch their second free throw. You can tell whether they're being constructively critical on themselves or destructively critical on themselves. Or watch Andy Murray play tennis. When he goes into a downward spiral, tennis is a good sport to watch if you want to see this, because they're all alone. I feel sorry for them, actually. They're out there, and if you watch, there's only, of the world's greatest tennis players, there's just a small number of people who can actually be constructively critical to themselves. Roger Federer is one of them. If you watch him, there's hardly any emotion, smooth. Be constructively self-critical. Be self-critical, not non-critical. Be constructively self-critical. And most novices, most beginners get it wrong. It's either intermittent, and this is hard to be constructively self-critical, particularly if something really bad has gone wrong. It takes a lot of personal integrity to be constructively self-critical. It may hurt, but it really doesn't hurt if you get good at this process. Be constructively self-critical all the time, not just when it's easy. The other reason why beginners in our culture get it wrong is we have encouraged a huge reliance on external feedback. Tests, evaluations, all external feedback. People get very little education until they come to residency with respect to actually self-feedback. Then you would think, I would think, this is what I would think, it's not true, but I would think that this is what the distribution would look like for those who are non-critical and destructively critical. And I would think there's this big bunch in the middle. But in reality, to me, most humans have, with respect to this, have a bimodal distribution. They either adopt a non-critical approach. I'm Ronnie, I'm perfect. I did tell you, didn't I tell you, Deb, that I am perfect? My mom told me I was. I must be. I did really well in college. I did great in medical school. I was a very good resident. I am perfect. Therefore, it must be the instrument. Oh, you know what? I've decided it's actually your fault, because I am perfect. You know, you see it. I'm exaggerating. I know, not always exaggerating, but I'm mostly exaggerating. And then the other side, the destructively critical. I'm Ronnie Stewart. I've worked really hard at this. I just broke a knot during it. I know we don't do this operation anymore, but it was a good one to do with the interns, an open appendectomy. I broke a knot on the mesoappendix. Now, as soon as the knot breaks, I'm telling myself all sorts of bad things. The patient's going to bleed to death. I can't do this. I can't believe I can't do this. Dr. Mueller's going to think I'm an idiot. I can't do this. I've practiced 1,000 times and I still can't do it. I'm going to fail. And the patient's going to die. All that in the span of 30 seconds do they tell themselves. Not good. How well does that person tie the knot the second time with their hand trembling? And then if you just want to conduct the experiment and make it a little worse, do this. Come on. Let's go. The patient's going to bleed to death. Seizures start happening. Just think of a third-year medical student doing a lumbar puncture in a 3-year-old for the first time. Little beads of sweat on their forehead. I mean, they're in the middle of a full-blown sympathetic nervous system response, which is a fight or flight reflex, which is not what you want to be doing in that position. So in reality, this takes conscious effort, and it should be modeled by everyone. Comprehensive, constructive, self-critical approach to patient care. Organizational performance improvement, it's the same. I added a few more descriptors though. Comprehensive, systematic, constructive, collegial, civil, self-critical approach to patient care focused on improving performance, not on punishment. Focused on improving performance, not on punishment. And most organizations get it wrong. They fall just like humans. They're run by humans. They fall into, I've been to hospitals. You basically go, how does your performance improvement process meet? You know, 3 surgeons meet with the other physicians and we hold our performance improvement meeting quarterly. The nurses don't come, or you don't get any feedback for the people who are actually doing the work? No, that's all protected. It's not very critical. 2, destructively critical. Surgeon makes a mistake, bad. You're bad. It's a bad mistake. Most organizations get it wrong. This is the Dunn-Abedian performance improvement domains. All are important. Leadership, structure and process, outcome, safety, access, costs. Leadership is doing the right thing. That's why it's important for you to be a good leader, is to get things done, to do the right thing. Structure and process are doing things right. So doing the right thing, doing things right. Outcomes, getting the right results. Safety, which is from the patient point of view is a key point, is getting the right results without hurting the patient. Access, getting the patient in the right amount of time. Cost, getting the right results with the right amount of expenditures. And patient experience is the right service for that patient. It's a tough, these are tough domains to get them all right. Tips to improve performance improvement. Well, if you think about it, if I were to say think hard about it. Well, one, it's self-evident. We need to look for opportunities for improvement. Make a goal that nobody suffers or dies in vain. It's a personal goal of mine. It may not go right, but I'm going to try hard not to repeat it again. So nobody suffers or dies in vain. And then if you really get good at searching for opportunities for improvement, you look for small things to improve after everything. How could I do it a little bit better? That leads to refinement and incremental improvement over time. I've kind of ran out of time to get my talk. I was going to show you photos from 15 years ago to today. I've used the standard surgical performance improvement on photography. And I can tell you they were horrible 15 years ago. They're not that good now, but they were horrible then. So consciously take responsibility. It actually, when there's a significant problem, it should actually be people fighting over whose responsibility it is. And I found that whenever I get involved in a situation, if I ask myself, what was my role in this? What could I have done differently? What is my responsibility? I can always find something that I'm responsible for, and then it changes my approach to the problem. Because now I'm an owner of that problem, and I'm going to try to solve the problem. It should be a fight when something untoward happens about who is most responsible, not who is least responsible, who is most responsible. Be non-destructive. Not part of core surgical training historically. I'm going to tell you that for some young people, when something really bad happens, that one biting, critical remark will be always remembered and may change a person's career. I'm not telling you to give hugs and kisses. I'm saying be constructive. Be constructive. Every person, every situation requires a different approach, but be constructive. Don't be destructive. Don't be in extirpative surgery mode. Be constructive. Don't make a bad situation worse. That also falls into the category of, subcategory of, we did everything right, but then what I did next actually made everyone focus on my behavior, not on the situation. I've just made a bad situation worse. Address patient care and safety first. Comprehensive review from multiple different advantages. So seek independent evaluation from peers. We have to focus on more than education. We as educators tend to focus everything on education. Use risk-adjusted clinical data and forgive and remember. Patient, passionate, and patient. The paradoxical P's. Passionate people oftentimes are not patient. And patient people oftentimes are not passionate. This is a Jacob Rees quote that the Spurs use. It's very important to be both. It's very important for you to be passionate, even evangelical. If you look at improvements in care, the people who've led those things have been evangelical. They've basically led campaigns for reducing surgical site infections or reducing central line infection rates. But to really make a difference requires patience. I'll give you a short, tiny example from the Committee on Trauma. The criteria for trauma centers were sort of worked out in 1976. The verification program took another 15 years to get going. And those people were really passionate, but it took 15 years. Turn back the clock even further. When Lister demonstrated that you could prevent wound infections, it took almost 40 years in some places for that to catch on. Be patient and be perseverant. This is Silent Cal, President Calvin Coolidge. Perseverance is critically important. The clinical programs, you know, what I know of them, and I don't have the full eyes on, but I was trying to think, is this true? I think it is true, that every major clinical program you know of has faced times when it appeared the program may fail or would fail. I can tell you, I'm happy to talk about them. They make actually for entertaining stories about my own personal failures, but I'll say they're more common than successes. Those failures build skill and resilience. And Jerry Grootman, talking about hope, which is key, basically sums it up by saying that hope acknowledges the significant obstacles and deep pitfalls, and it has no room for delusion. You must be perseverant. You must be perseverant. So I know there's people here who would say, how do you know when not to persevere? When do I say, checking out here? Well, I don't know. But I'm going to try to give a 3-rule test. 1, is there a need for my service? If there's not a need for my service, then persevering probably doesn't really work. That didn't work for Kodak. It didn't work for Kodak when they were in the film business. There still is a need for film, but not, if you go to Rochester, it's not the same. But if you want to me, a better thing is there a need for my service? No. Well, can I adapt to fit the need? Think if Kodak would have done that. Is there a need for my service if they would have viewed themselves as being in imaging rather than film? Second, do I have the skills and tools to fulfill the need? So if there's a need, but I don't have the skills and tools, well, I don't know about persevering there. But to me, the better question is, could I develop those skills and tools? And lastly, do I personally have the desire to persevere? And is this aligned with my long-term vision and mission is this aligned with what I wrote in my personal statement? If it is, and I have the desire to persevere, and there's a need, and I have the skills, I can tell you the overwhelming odds are I will successfully persevere. If the answer to this question is no, are you sure? Or are you really just in a dark place? Are you in some temporary dark place? It doesn't look like anything special. It's a corporate-owned parking lot on 1604. You wouldn't even really notice these little blue bonnets here. I noticed them. It's a convenient place where you can lay on the ground and have EMS come harass you. But that's actually that blue bonnet. I mean, would I notice if I was not in a good mood? If I wasn't paying close attention to the flower? And sometimes this is sunrise. This is sunrise, actually. That's actually what it looked like yesterday. It looked worse yesterday. That's sunrise. This is sunrise. The sun eking through a crack, which you know the sun will come out. This is sunrise. Actually, just before. For those science geeks, you note Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. This is sunrise. So, it's important to persevere. And wrapping up, this is, again, Robert Greenleaf on the importance of perseverance to institutions. And I personally think you can change this to patient care. You can talk about difficult patient care. It requires not only compassion and concern, but self-sacrifice, wisdom, and tough-mindedness. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions. Questions? Dr. Strinik?
I was surprised to see that curve of those four things dropping off in 1970. Was that about the era?
Started about 1965.
Because somehow, I don't know whether we were just shielded in this department, but I would have put it about at least 20 years longer as far as how we watch people and their participation. You know, the biggest thing, and Carlos and Wayne will agree, is we used to have grand rounds or literature conference at the faculty homes. And over time, there was just less and less participation, you know, by the residents. We tried multiple things, but Dr. Ousted always thought it was a fantastic thing to have the residents come to the faculty homes, you know, break bread, have a beer, and have a good scientific meeting. And it kind of fell off, but I put that timeline, at least in my perspective, about 20 years later than that. Although nationally, I know there was a fall off. A lot of the major organizations were, you know, the Lions Club and...
Trust me, it's 1965. I mean, people are different. Different families are different. Different people are different. Some places it has never fallen off at all. I mean, there's places it's never fallen off at all, period. There are people still participating at a very high level. But it is people dependent. I think the whole resident, and we've lived through several different, have that fall off. But participation is not what it was in, it's just not what it was in at least it to this point is not what it was in the post-World War II area. There was something about our founding faculty, their generation, that made them participate in organizations. Questions? Okay, thank you very much.